These are the most chilling, top 10 most terrifying UFO encounters ever documented. Welcome to The Purple Files. If you enjoy our videos, please consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get right into it. The date was August 21st, 1955, and in the quiet rural farmland between the towns of Kelly and Hopkinsville, Kentucky, the Sutton family was about to endure a night of sheer, unrelenting terror. What began as a calm evening would descend into a chaotic, hours-long siege by beings that were not of this world. It stands as one of the most bizarre and well-documented close-quarters encounters in the history of unidentified flying objects. It all started when Billy Ray Taylor, a family friend visiting the Suttons' isolated farmhouse, went outside to fetch water from the well. He saw a brilliant, multicolored light streak across the sky and drop down into a gully not far from the house. A short while later, the family dog began barking violently before running to hide under the house. Then the figures appeared. A small humanoid creature, no more than 3.5 feet tall, emerged from the darkness. It had a massive, oversized head, huge, glowing yellow eyes, large pointed ears, and long spindly arms that ended in talons. When the men of the house, Lucky Sutton and Billy Ray Taylor, saw it approaching, they did what any rural Kentuckian would do: they grabbed their guns. They fired their .22 rifle and shotgun directly at the creature, hitting it squarely, but instead of falling, the being simply did a backflip and scurried away into the shadows, completely unharmed. Soon after, another creature appeared in a window. They shot it out, leaving only a hole in the screen. What followed was a horrifying siege that lasted for nearly 4 hours. A total of 12 of these goblin-like beings surrounded the farmhouse, peering in windows, clawing at the roof, and floating down from the trees. Each time the family shot one, they would hear a metallic ping, as if they were shooting a metal bucket, and the creature would simply float or scamper away. The family, including 7 adults and 4 children, were trapped and terrified. Eventually, they saw an opening, piled into 2 cars, and fled to the Hopkinsville police station. The police chief, Russell Greenwell, noted their obvious and genuine terror. He and 4 other officers followed them back to the farmhouse. They found no creatures, but they did find a house riddled with bullet holes and a family still paralyzed by fear. After the police left, the Suttons claimed the creatures returned, resuming their terrifying vigil until just before dawn. This was not a distant light in the sky. This was a home invasion by beings that were bulletproof, relentless, and utterly alien. On May 20th, 1967, Stefan Michalak was in his element, a lone geologist prospecting for quartz in the vast Canadian wilderness near Falcon Lake, Manitoba. The peaceful solitude was shattered when he looked up to see 2 glowing, oval-shaped crafts descending silently from the sky. One hovered briefly before speeding away, but the other continued down, settling onto a large, flat rock formation not far from where he stood. For the next 30 minutes, Michalak cautiously observed the object, sketching its smooth, seamless surface in his notepad. It was a silent, metallic machine with no markings. As he moved closer, he could feel a wave of warm air and smell a sharp, sulfurous odor. He also heard a soft whirring and a faint, hissing sound. Believing it might be a secret American experimental craft, he grew bold enough to reach out and touch its surface. The material was so hot that it instantly melted the fingertip of his heavy work glove. Suddenly, a small square panel on the craft slid open, revealing a grid-like pattern of holes inside. Without warning, a blast of intensely hot gas erupted from this vent, striking Michalak squarely in the chest. His shirt and cap burst into flames. He screamed in agony, frantically tearing the burning clothes from his body as the craft began to rise silently from the rock. It hovered for a moment before ascending rapidly and vanishing from sight. Michalak, injured and in shock, stumbled back through the woods. The attack left him with a pattern of first-degree burns on his chest and abdomen that formed a distinct grid, a perfect match for the vent he had seen. In the weeks that followed, he suffered from severe headaches, nausea, and weight loss. symptoms consistent with radiation exposure. This was not a distant sighting. It was a violent, physical assault that left behind undeniable, agonizing proof in the form of burns, radioactive soil, and a man's lifelong trauma. The night of October 11, 1973, was calm and dark on the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker were fishing from a quiet, abandoned pier, enjoying the evening peace. Their tranquility was destroyed by a strange zipping sound that cut through the night air. They turned to see a glowing oblong object bathed in an eerie blue light, hovering just above the riverbank. A doorway appeared on the craft, and 3 bizarre figures floated out towards them. They were roughly 5 feet tall, with wrinkled grey skin and no discernible neck. Their heads fused directly into their shoulders, and their faces were nightmarish, featuring only cone-like protrusions where a nose and ears should have been. Instead of hands, they had large, pincer-like claws. Both men were instantly paralyzed by an unseen force, unable to move or even cry out as the robotic beings floated them effortlessly towards the ship. Inside the craft, they were subjected to a terrifying examination. A large mechanical eye, like something from a science fiction nightmare, moved around the room, scanning their frozen bodies from head to toe. They were powerless, prisoners of a cold and silent procedure. After what felt like an eternity, they were floated back outside to the pier. The craft then ascended silently and vanished into the night. Shaking and hysterical, the 2 men managed to get in their car and drive to the local sheriff's office. Seeing their genuine terror but skeptical of the story, deputies put Hickson and Parker in a room alone with a hidden tape recorder. They hoped to catch them admitting to a hoax. Instead, the tape captured the raw, unfiltered sounds of 2 deeply traumatized men trying to comprehend what happened to them, their voices trembling with a fear that could not be faked. It remains some of the most compelling evidence of the sheer terror an abduction can cause. On the morning of September 16, 1994, the playground of the Ariel School in Rua, Zimbabwe was full of energy. During their mid-morning recess, dozens of students were playing when their attention was drawn to the sky. They saw several silver objects maneuvering above them. While the teachers were inside for a staff meeting, one of these discs descended and landed in a field of brush just beyond the schoolyard boundary. From the top of the landed craft, a small being emerged. It was about 3 feet tall, with a slender body, a thin neck, and a large head dominated by enormous, dark, captivating eyes. The children stood frozen, many of them gripped by an intense fear. The being began to move towards them, but never spoke a word. Instead, the students later reported it communicated with them directly in their minds. The messages were not friendly greetings. The children were shown powerful and deeply disturbing visions. They saw a future Earth where all the trees had died, the rivers were polluted, and the air was unbreathable. The telepathic message was a dire warning. Humanity's reckless use of technology was destroying their only home, and if they did not change their ways, it would lead to their own extinction. When the recess bell rang and the teachers came outside, they found the children scattered across the playground in a state of collective hysteria and panic. Over the next few hours, 62 separate children were interviewed, and they all told the same consistent story. Their detailed drawings, made independently, all depicted the same craft and the same big-eyed being who had delivered a terrifying apocalyptic message directly into their mind. In the early morning hours of September 19, 1976, the skies over Tehran, the capital of Iran, became the stage for an unnerving display. Multiple citizens flooded police and military phone lines, reporting a massive, brilliant light hovering in the sky. The object was so bright and unusual that the Imperial Iranian Air Force decided to investigate, scrambling an F-4 Phantom jet. As the first pilot approached the enormous diamond-shaped UFO, all of his onboard instrumentation and his communication systems suddenly went dead. He was flying blind, completely cut off from his base. Spooked, he broke off his approach and retreated, and as he flew away from the object, his systems came back online. A second F-4 Phantom was then launched to try again. The pilot of the second jet closed to a range of 25 nautical miles. As he did, a smaller, glowing object detached from the main craft and began flying directly towards his F-4 at an incredible speed. Believing he was under attack, the pilot armed an AM-9 Sidewinder missile and prepared to fire. The moment he pressed the button, his entire weapons control panel failed. He had no missiles, no cannons, nothing. He was utterly defenseless. The pilot took evasive action, putting his jet into a sharp dive to escape the pursuing object, which followed him for a short time before rejoining the parent craft. The event was so serious and so well documented by radar and multiple military witnesses that it became the subject of a multi-page assessment by the United States Defense Intelligence Agency. The official report confirmed that 2 of the world's most advanced fighter jets were repeatedly and effortlessly neutralized, proving the existence of a technology so superior it could render our best military hardware completely powerless. On the night of September 19th, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were driving home through the dark, lonely roads of the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Their trip was interrupted by a strange light in the sky that moved in erratic ways, eventually descending as if to intercept them. Barney stopped the car and got out with a pair of binoculars. He saw a flat, spinning craft with a row of windows, and through them he could make out several humanoid figures in black, glossy uniforms who were looking directly at him. He ran back to the car in a panic, screaming to Betty, "They're going to capture us!" The next thing either of them consciously remembered was being 35 miles further down the road, with over 2 hours of their journey completely unaccounted for. They arrived home feeling dazed and confused. Their watches had both stopped working and would never work again. Betty's dress was torn and stained, and the tops of Barney's best shoes were inexplicably scuffed and scraped. In the weeks that followed, both were plagued by severe anxiety, nightmares, and stress medical issues. They eventually sought help from Dr. Benjamin Simon, a respected Boston psychiatrist who specialized in hypnotherapy. Under separate recorded hypnosis sessions, Betty and Barney independently told the same horrifying story. They recounted being floated into the craft, separated, and subjected to intrusive physical examinations by the strange, grey-skinned beings with large, wraparound eyes. During her hypnosis, Betty recalled being shown a 3-dimensional map of stars and was told it was a trade route. She drew this map from memory after the session. Years later, after the map was published, a teacher and amateur astronomer named Marjorie Fish built a model of our local stellar neighborhood. She discovered that Betty's drawing was a stunningly accurate depiction of the Zeta Reticuli star system, a perspective and layout that was completely unknown to the public, and certainly to Betty Hill at that time, providing a chilling piece of evidence for what would become the terrifying blueprint for all alien abduction stories to follow. In the cold, late days of December 1980, the twin RAF bases of Woodbridge and Bentwaters in Suffolk, England, were on high alert. Housing United States Air Force personnel, these were critical NATO installations during the Cold War. In the early hours of December 26th, security patrolmen near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge saw strange lights descending into the adjacent Rendlesham Forest and, believing it was a downed aircraft, went to investigate. 3 patrolmen, including Sergeant Jim Peniston and Airman John Burrows, went into the dark, pine-filled woods. They did not find a plane crash. Instead, they found a small, triangular craft resting on the forest floor. It was about 9 feet long and 7 feet high, made of a smooth, black metallic material, and was bathed in a brilliant white light. As Peniston approached, the air was thick with static electricity. He saw strange, hieroglyphic-like symbols etched on its surface, and was close enough to touch the craft's cool, smooth hull. After nearly an hour of observation, the craft silently lifted off the ground, maneuvered through the trees, and vanished. The next day, investigators found 3 distinct impressions in the ground where the object had landed, as well as broken canopy branches and radiation readings that were significantly higher than normal background levels. The terror returned 2 nights later when the lights came back. This time, the deputy base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, led a team into the forest himself to debunk the claims. Armed with a micro-cassette recorder, Holt and his men documented what they saw. They witnessed the strange lights again, one of which beamed down a laser-like ray of light directly at their feet, and another that seemed to drip a molten metal-like substance. Years later, Penniston revealed that when he touched the symbols on the craft, he received a telepathic download of 16 pages of binary code. When translated, it contained a cryptic message from time travelers, originating from a location known as High Brestle, warning of humanity's future. This was not just a sighting, it was a close-quarters encounter by high-level military personnel with a craft that left behind physical evidence and a terrifying message. The night of March 13, 1997 began like any other in Arizona. But shortly after sunset, the sky over the state became the stage for one of the largest mass UFO sightings in history. The event came in 2 distinct waves. The first was a V-shaped formation of 5 to 7 amber-colored orbs that was seen moving uniformly across the state, from Prescott in the north down to the edge of Phoenix. Thousands of people witnessed this silent, high-altitude formation. The second wave was what truly terrified the population. Around 10 p.m. local time, a colossal, V-shaped or boomerang-like object appeared over the city of Phoenix. Witnesses described it as being impossibly large. Some said a mile wide, and it was flying low without making a single sound. It was so massive that it blocked out the stars behind it, appearing as a solid black shape against the night sky, outlined by several large steady lights. It moved slowly and deliberately over the metropolitan area for several minutes before disappearing. The event caused a public panic. Thousands of witnesses, from pilots and air traffic controllers to police officers and everyday citizens, all described the same silent, city-sized craft. The military's official explanation was that the lights were simply high-altitude flares dropped from an A-10 Warthog aircraft during a training exercise. This explanation was widely rejected by witnesses who knew the difference between distant, drifting flares and a solid, structured craft flying low over their heads. The most damning testimony came years later from the governor of Arizona at the time, Fife Symington III. He had initially mocked the event at a press conference to quell public fear, but later admitted he had seen the craft himself and described it as otherworldly. The terror of the Phoenix Lights lies in its sheer scale and audacity. A silent, mile-wide object flew over a major American city with complete impunity, witnessed by thousands, demonstrating that they can go wherever they want, whenever they want, and there is absolutely nothing we can do about it. On November 5, 1975, a 7-man logging crew was finishing their day's work in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona. As they drove down a remote mountain road, they saw a brilliant, luminous glow coming from behind a hill. As they rounded the corner, they saw the source, a large metallic, saucer-shaped craft hovering silently about 100 feet away, making a soft, high-pitched hum. The driver stopped the truck, but 22-year-old Travis Walton, against the frantic protests of his crewmates, got out and ran towards the object for a better look. As he stood beneath it, looking up, the craft began to make a louder noise. Suddenly, a brilliant blue-green beam of light shot down from the saucer and struck him. Walton's body was lifted a foot into the air, his arms and legs outstretched, and then he was thrown back 10 feet, landing limp on the ground. Believing Walton was dead and that they were next, the remaining 6 men panicked. They sped away in their truck, leaving Walton behind. After a short distance, the crew's foreman, Mike Rogers, stopped the truck and convinced the terrified men they had to go back. But when they returned to the clearing, both the craft and Travis Walton were gone. They had vanished without a trace. The crew reported the incident to the police, who immediately suspected foul play. They believed the UFO story was a clumsy lie to cover up a murder. An intense search of the forest began, and the 6 crewmen were subjected to grueling interrogations and polygraph tests, all of which they passed. For 5 days, there was no sign of Walton. Then, late on the 5th night, Walton's brother-in-law received a frantic phone call from a payphone. It was Travis. He was found huddled and shivering, dehydrated and having lost over 10 pounds. He had fragmented, terrifying memories of waking up inside the craft, surrounded by small, grey beings with large eyes, and being subjected to painful experiments. His 5-day ordeal remains one of the most well-documented and terrifying abduction cases on record. In early July of 1947, a severe thunderstorm raged across the desert plains of New Mexico. The next morning, a local ranch foreman named W.W. Mac Brazel rode out to check on his sheep and discovered something extraordinary. His property was littered with a strange, metallic debris field that stretched for hundreds of yards. The material was unlike anything he had ever seen. Lightweight beams that could not be bent or broken, and pieces of foil-like material that, when crumpled, would unfold itself, leaving no creases. Recognizing the unusual nature of the debris, Brazel contacted the local authorities, who in turn contacted the Roswell Army Airfield, home to the 509th Bomb Group, the world's only atomic-capable squadron. The base's intelligence officer, Major Jesse Marcel, went to the site and collected the material. On July 8th, the base's public information officer issued a stunning press release stating that the military had recovered the remains of a flying disc. The story was front-page news across the nation. The very next day, the story was killed. The military held a second press conference, this time with a different officer who claimed the entire incident was a mistake. He presented the debris from a common weather balloon and told the press that Major Marcel had simply misidentified it. The official story was that nothing of importance had happened. For decades, that lie held, but years later, the truth began to leak out from those who were there. High-ranking officials, including Major Marcel himself, swore on their deathbeds that the weather balloon was a cover story. They spoke of a second crash site, where not just debris, but the main craft and its occupants were found. A local mortician, Glenn Dennis, gave testimony about receiving strange calls from the base asking for child-size, hermetically sealed coffins. The terror of Roswell is not just that an alien craft crashed. The terror is the massive, immediate, and brutally efficient government cover-up that followed. The horrors they found that day were so profound, so reality-shattering, that our own authorities decided it was better to lie to the world than to ever admit what they dragged out of the desert. From home invasions by bulletproof goblins to a burned man's physical scars, from military jets rendered powerless to the ultimate government cover-up, these 10 cases represent the most undeniable and terrifying evidence on record. They are not just lights in the sky or blurry photos. They are documented events with multiple witnesses, physical traces, and traumatized victims. They prove that we are not alone and that the truth of that reality is far more frightening than we can imagine. And that is it. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the Purple Files, click the like button, and drop a comment down below. More videos to come, and until then, thanks for watching.